In Agatha Christie's crime book, Murder on the Orient Express, Belgian investigator Hercule Poirot investigates the gruesome stabbing of an American tycoon who was riding a long-distance passenger train. While the 1934 story of murder and vengeance on a stranded, snowed-in train is, of course, a work of fiction, Christie drew elements of her plot straight from the newspapers. In Christie's story, Poirot is on the Orient Express, traveling from Syria to London when a man named Ratchet asks Poirot to investigate some death threats he's been receiving. But Poirot declines. The following morning, a snowdrift blocks the train's path, and Ratchet is discovered dead in his compartment after having been stabbed. When Poirot assumes his detective persona once more and investigates Ratchet's compartment for hints, he discovers a burned piece of paper with the words, "Remember little Daisy Armstrong?" He concludes that Ratchet was actually a mobster named Cassetti who abducted Daisy Armstrong, a 3-year-old heiress. He collected $200,000 in ransom before her body was discovered. But, because Cassetti was wealthy, he was able to avoid trial and leave the country. Who killed Ratchet on the train is the main focus of the book's narrative. Daisy Armstrong's fictional case was likely known to readers in the mid-1930s who had followed national news of the kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh's infant son. The subplot was inspired by the real-life tragedy, according to Christie's official website. The 20-month-old infant vanished from his bed on March 1, 1932. The New Jersey home's nursery window had a ransom note of $50,000 attached. The kidnapping of Lindbergh caused a kind of hysteria throughout the nation. As soon as the news was announced for the morning edition, newspapers literally stopped printing. J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, organized operatives to aid state authorities in their investigation. The children's remains were found once the whole ransom was paid, just like in the novel and in real life. Charles Jr.'s body was discovered 4 miles from the Lindbergh house, and, in the novel, Cassetti killed Daisy shortly after taking her hostage. When the book was published, it became incredibly famous, and Lindbergh specialist Robert Zorn says that people must have understood the similarities between Daisy and Charles Jr. The parallels are too striking, he claimed. Even Christie herself had opinions about the case. She thought that the kidnapping was carried out by a foreigner, and her suspicions were confirmed when the offender was identified as German immigrant Richard Hauptmann. The story was also inspired in part by an incident in 1929 when the Orient Express was stranded in a blizzard in Turkey for 6 days. Similarly, Christie was familiar with the experience of being stuck on a train, just like the protagonists in the book. In 1928, Christie took her first trip overseas by herself and did so aboard the Orient Express. This would be the first of many journeys by train. She enjoyed taking the Orient Express and always had her typewriter with her. On one particular trip in 1931, part of the track was washed away due to heavy rain and flooding, which caused the train to stop. "My darling, what a journey," she wrote to Max Malawan, her second husband, in a letter. "Started out from Istanbul in a violent thunderstorm. We went very slowly during the night and about 3 a.m. stopped altogether." Agatha Christie's meticulous attention to detail is also obvious throughout the story. While composing it, she double-checked cabin layouts, door handles, and light switches, noting their locations. These important details would later help Poirot crack the case. As for Poirot himself, in the author's own autobiography, she says that he was inspired by one of her Belgian neighbors. Christie wrote, "Why not make my detective a Belgian, I thought. There were all types of refugees. How about a refugee police officer?" It was by no means rare for Christie to draw inspiration for her novels from actual events. Her stories were influenced by a variety of personal experiences, whether it was her familiarity with poisons through her work with the British Red Cross or her obsession with a rubella outbreak, which served as the inspiration for the mirror cracked from side to side. According to what she stated in her memoirs, her imagination was unbridled, and she didn't hesitate to draw inspiration from her surroundings. She wrote, "Plots come to me at such odd moments, when I am walking along the street or examining a hat shop. Suddenly a splendid idea comes into my head.